I know it's on a smaller scale, but how much or does it concern you as a librarian about major website redesigns? Like, does that have like a similar level like this where you really want to get involved so you understand what features changed and whatnot?
So I think it depends on what the resource is and what the feature set is that our users are relying on. That probably falls into sort of that database migration area, where if there's new search functionality and there's different ways that people are able to access the content, we kind of need to be aware of it. It may be less fraught with like entitlement issues. And I think, one thing that everybody needs to be aware of with websites is there's always compromises. So as we move towards responsive design and making sure that we're accessible, sometimes that means things really don't look as good on your desktop as they used to. It's the way that things are. So I think being aware of those things also, they can go onto our migration planning. And then we can just do a quick check.
One of the things that APS did, not only did we put out an FAQ for our librarians and talk about, what new features they can expect on our platform and, things that they could pass along to their clients, we also put together an instructional video on how to use the new features, and that was really popular. Another thing for publishers to think about is, putting something out there like that for your users.
What's the best way to communicate with librarians?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? What's the best case? And in a minute, I'm going to let them suggest what they think the best case is. I'm also going to tell you what Duke did. So what we did is we exported every single email address that we possibly could have about all of our customers and sent them email after email after email. They didn't hate us, I think, so that seems to work fairly well. But posting to listservs as well, making sure you're in contact with agents and consortia and essentially every partner you work with. That's how we did it. But how do you prefer to be communicated with?
Well, as a consortium director, if you communicate to me, I can communicate out to lots of people. I hope I'm not misspeaking. I bet you librarians would probably read my emails before they read some of your emails.
Yeah,
I think because of my newsletter, it comes out every couple of weeks. They know that there's salient information in it. So,
yeah, I would say more sources is better. That most of us in our contracts have technical contact information that's in our license agreements, or in our admin portals have an email address that goes to our whoever is in charge of technical support. That person should hear. I would say the bombardment method, it means that everybody knows. It also means whoever is actually in charge of that at that institution receives, let's call it 15 forwards the minute it comes out. People are like, FYI, in case you didn't get this. And you're like, but sometimes you didn't get it. And so it's better safe than sorry. Yeah, but there should be a technical contact who should hear.
Yeah, I think that trying to work through consortia is a really great way, because if I get I'm part of the BTAA. If I get an email from the BTAA, I will read it. Whereas, I'm getting maybe 200 email messages a day. And so if 100 of those are from different content providers, I don't read them. I just can't. It's too much. And so things can get missed that way. But I think the other, option, if you're doing something major and you have sales representatives, if I'm getting an email from my sales representative versus like what's new at such and such publisher, I'm not going to read what's new at such and such publisher because I'm like, I don't have any money right now to spend, so I'm not interested. But if Joe Smith contacts me and says, hey, how you doing? I want to let you know we're going to be doing this migration. You might not have seen this, but here's a link. Like, that can also be really helpful, just that personal touch to sort of elevate it above like everything else.
What about a clear subject line? platform migration. Not what's new. That just occurred to me. One other thing we did, and I don't know how applicable this is to everybody in the room, but we go to many library conferences, and we heavily featured the migration and migration information at the booth, so as we interacted with our customers coming by, they could ask about it, or we could tell them about it and make sure they knew about it.
Yeah, one of the things, so I attend a lot of the domestic library conferences, and one of the things we had was a little postcard that said, here's our platform migration information URL, go to it, and I would just stuff it in librarians' hands and say, please give this to your technical services librarian. I like to think they did. They seemed receptive, but it was just another way to get that information out there.
Just a real quick, do you want to make a quick programming note?
Sure. Just so everyone is aware, we were going to have the librarian workshop, but for time and because we think it's more productive to answer some of the questions you all have, we're going to dive into the Q&A session. We may jump back to answer some of the broader topics later.
And we may take some of the questions that were in the workshop and pose them back to you.
I was curious how valuable a library site is for librarians, specifically geared towards librarians.
Yeah, so we absolutely appreciate those and look at those. I would say the tripping point, and this came up in someone's slides, is if you write them before the migration and then never update them, right? So what the problem is stale information. If your migration slips and it was going to happen in June and now it's happening in September when classes start, which happens so often, right? And is a big problem, right? We need to see that. If there's a known problem, if there's something, if those could be kind of living documents as opposed to something optimistic, that's right, everything at the outset, because everything looks great 4 months in advance. But those really, they line up well with our internal checklists, and they really help us assess what is the impact. So we really like them, but we like them more if they stay current.
We had a page on our website, and we prominently at the top of it featured last updated. So we kept, just some rough sense for any librarian who came by, like, oh, this has changed since I last looked. It's worth me reading.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to say about our tracking of that site is people tended not to click in through the links on that library migration page, but they did appear just from the heat map to be looking at that top updated part, so.
Just want to say one thing. Sometimes I'll go to sites and it just gives me an email, if there's an issue, blah, 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 email. Truthfully, I want a phone number. I'm the kind of person I just want to pick up the phone and I want to talk to someone. I don't want to have to write out a lengthy email. I just want to talk to somebody, so.
And while you're all percolating then on other questions you might want to ask us, one thing I'm curious to hear about is librarians have mentioned a bunch of pain points. Are there ones that you either hadn't heard of before or you have a good, easy solution for resolving them? Because I know they would be excited to hear that.
Or that strike you as good ideas, but you can sense some complexity that might prevent it. Well, I've got one. So when it comes to content platforms specifically, not database, but where, journal or book content is moving from one place to another, we talked about whether we could do a dual platform run, and we didn't see any technical way possible. And so I'm curious as to whether you've had a publisher platform migration where you had dual platforms, before I dive into mentioning what the complexities seem to be.
Absolutely, we have. And they are appreciated. Yeah, because it means there's I would say, a feeling that sometimes these things launch and there is so much wrong. Content is missing. We've had things launch where the search only brings back results from the last 5 years. That's not something we should be the ones that are finding when it's live. And so having dual access gives you this way to kind of have it be a soft launch, right? It can be more of a beta, And it gives people the ability to interact, to send usability feedback. We've had things where there are giant login buttons for things that we subscribe to that had to be removed because they were so deeply misleading, right? The access provided by Yale University Library was little tiny up in a corner and a giant login button asking for all this other information on the side when you already have access. That things like that if we can just look at that early, because there's absolutely an understanding that this is a big lift, right? And that it won't be perfect at point of migration, but there are things that if we could get them out of the way before this ever moved into public sphere.
So wait, is that a true, so I think what I'm thinking of is the dual platform post-launch.
Oh, post-launch. So we have done it both ways. We have had dual post-launch and we have had beta access pre-launch.
Okay, because. Yeah, so how do
So it has a
how do we
totally different-
redirect our URLs?
It's not redirecting.
How
It's
do we
just
update our Crossref? How do we update your link resolvers to the new
So
place?
it is more usability. So who Index of Medieval Art just did a beta. Project Muse is in a beta right now, and they've got journals and ebooks.
Are they in your discovery system?
Probably not for the beta.
And it's not their system, but their production system, their system of production.
Yeah, I think you are correct. There are limitations. Yeah, but generally the way I've seen this happen is the old system stays predominant. But the new platform with the content becomes available. However, from the discovery area, it continues to link to the old system, but it gives us in the library a chance to audit the content to see if it migrated over, to talk to some power users. What it doesn't do is, like, if it turns out like every link from SFX is just going to break when you migrate over because there's parsing errors or something. That is hard. That's a challenge. One of the things that has also been helpful is, so let's say you make that flip, because you're right, that is it's like a switch. It's like on or off. It's not like a dimmer, right?
It's not like, hey, this deal, I can go here and here.
But if the old site remains available, at least then, you're like, okay, well, something just horrible happened on the new site, but people can still at least access content on the old site. That's
Not
been
if
the
I
case
set my
too.
URLs up to redirect once it goes live. I don't mean to put like a technical challenge down. I
No,
just
I'm
think
trying
these
to
are
think
points that
about
are really interesting because it makes so much sense. And especially if we talk about it as a usability testing period that is actually prior to the hard launch. But, where things that weren't right when we launched, so much of them were around that access and discovery system that running a dual platform would not have revealed. So I think it's interesting for me to understand, and maybe for others, that if the goal is getting familiar with the interface and giving some key usability insights, then we can plan and maybe do that prior to actual hard launch. But I'm still not clear on how to manage true dual platform access while also having all systems be go. Yeah.
So the thing I can think about, and this is, it's not the same. It's not journal and ebook content. We had dual access on LexisNexis and Nexus Uni, and we set them both up in our discovery services.
I noticed that, and I wondered.
And it ran in parallel, and then we had a period where people were looking at it, and so we dropped an intermediate page in. If you started from the library website, it would say, LexisNexis Academic is going away, it's becoming Nexus Uni, click here to go to the new site, click here to go to the classic LexisNexis Academic. And so we did it that way, and it's on someone's Outlook calendar that on June 4th, the old version is getting removed, that note is getting removed, and we're shutting everything. It's probably off now, more or less. But it meant all those links and things were up beforehand, and that we don't have journal records in our catalog for that, right? That there is less complexity around redirects. It was something that in our back-end system we could turn on. It was a catalog record we could add. And so it was much simpler to run two at once.
And just real quick on dual platforms, I was told this, I didn't have a chance to verify, but I was told that Google Scholar also penalizes you if your content is in multiple places. I don't know exactly how that works or how long your content being in different places might, but it's just a rumor. Since we couldn't do we didn't know how to do a dual platform launch anyway, we said, great, another good reason not to do it.
And just because you brought up Google Scholar, just a comment about indexing. When you are making your limit, I guess you'd say, your emergency cutoff for, someone is spamming or downloading content, etc., make sure that if you can get your Google Scholar in a proxy or where it says, yes, it's okay that Google Scholar indexes all of our content, we would like them to click all of the pages because otherwise they may get temporarily locked out. So making sure your indexers have access is really important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. This kind of swerves more into the publisher lessons learned piece, but that spike in traffic you might see is going to be from every service trying to re-index every piece of content on your site. Google Scholar has it on their calendar. They're going there. You're probably also being re-indexed by all the general web services. The discovery services may be indexing your website. Vendors that you have, like Deep Dive, these third-party vendors who keep metadata records of all your stuff, are re-indexing your site. So all of that, I guess we just didn't have visibility to it before. This was one of our blind spots. So figuring out how to get them corralled into whitelisted IP addresses and get them following good rules for the rate that they were indexing the site, that's been a little bit of a surprise process that we had to follow. Carrie, did you run into any of that?
And we're still discovering things. Just recently, I like to use the Wayback Machine to go back to our old site to see what it looked like, and I noticed that our site had not been crawled since we launched, and I'm like, ooh, Wayback Machine must be not be whitelisted, so they can't crawl it. So it's just an example of things you're not thinking about. That sites you want to go in and crawl, but they can't, and you don't know it.
Or folks who come to crawl you and you don't know who they are or why they're crawling you.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for sorry, were you gonna?
Well, I was going to add, I had an interesting experience with a publisher recently that was really helpful for us, although admittedly I think takes a lot of effort on the publisher part, where they did a discovery audit of their resources in our discovery system. And so basically this publisher went to check our catalog. Was there content in our catalog? They went to our discovery service, which at Chicago is EDS. Were the links showing up correctly in EDS? If they were trying to use our Open URL Resolver, which was SFX, was it, was it accurate in there? Was it proxying correctly? They went into Google Scholar. They discovered something about Google Scholar that I'd never ever seen before. They were like, what's this other University of Chicago in this drop-down list here? And that's not your link resolver. And I was like, how did you even get to that page? And so, I asked this person, and this is actually a service that this publisher is doing for its customers. And just coincidentally, the BTAA is having a conference right now on discovery. So the Big Ten Academic Alliance. Okay. And so, so they are doing a presentation looking at the libraries across. So the BTAA is basically the Big Ten Academic Alliance. What else can I say about it? The University of Chicago happens to be in it because at one point in time we were in the Big Ten many years ago. And so they went across all of these major libraries and looked and did this audit. But it discovered several mistakes on our part where we didn't have the proxy turned on in SFX. So those links weren't proxying. That meant they wouldn't work for people that were coming in off campus, and we didn't even realize that. they discovered this strange situation where we had like ProQuest registered with Google Scholar. Don't even know how that happened. So we've been able to contact them to try to get that removed. And from, you know, this might be something to think about sort of as a post-launch, like did all these things work out? Are there, and maybe you can't audit like every customer, but if you have some customers that you could sit down and kind of look at everything, because if there's a problem with one customer, there could be problems with other customers. And, you know, it's useful for us in the sense that we pay a lot of money for this resource. The publisher wants us to continue subscribing to it. They want to see the usage numbers be robust. We want our usage numbers to be robust. So we're all kind of on the same page here to make sure that the content is integrated within, you know, this actually pretty complex discovery environment.
And another aspect of working, you know, making sure you and your content are playing nicely with the discovery service is not just all your back content that's migrating, but making sure that there is a method for getting new material that's going up on your platform. So if your platform is the focal point from which all of your content goes out to anywhere it needs to go, whether that's into aggregations you might participate in, or to these discovery services, because just giving them your files is the easiest way to make sure they get your metadata. You know, you want to think about that with your platform too. And I think one of the things the librarians and the publishers agreed on as we were putting this together is that the whole discovery ecosystem that operates between us is a huge, I think it's way understood by publishers. They're not our vendors. We don't deal with them. Our systems don't run on them. They're not particularly responsive to us. They don't particularly understand anything about content or publishing other than the pieces of metadata that they index. So it can be really hard to have conversations with them. And I think this is a big area I know it's a big area for growth at Duke. I won't speak for any other publishers. And at least based on my somewhat narrow experience through the RFP process, it's a big opportunity. It's a big area for platforms to be looking at in terms of supporting publishers to bring with it, baked into the platform, these connectors into the discovery systems, as opposed to them being for each publisher a setup for each one of these, because they're constantly getting bought and merging and changing names, and it needs to be like PubMed Central and Crossref deposits are. That's my pitch. My other hobby horse.
Before I ask the librarians a question, I know we've all been talking a lot. Has any of this brought up anything other folks want to ask?
Just for your experience as the publishers, how much help did you get from your service providers on being made aware of some of those gotchas that you were finding? Like, were you getting any help from them on some of them based on their experience as well, or was it mainly just stuff you were finding?
So I'll start and then bring the microphone over to Carrie. You know, I think that most of the gotchas had to do with our stuff that our platform vendor wouldn't know. Also, what's dangerous about the blind spots is that they're blind spots, and you have them, but your platform vendor has them also. So you're assuming that their platform works like the other platform you're most familiar with in any given instance, and they're assuming that you as a publisher work like their other clients. And so the advice was know your blind spots to publishers. It would be great if the platform vendors were also cataloging their blind spots and their differences, because the way these things scale efficiently is to fit everybody into a box. But as Craig mentioned, there were a lot of differences that it was valuable to highlight. Now, I wasn't even able to highlight all of them, but at least the ones I knew about that I was able to highlight were helpful. But it would be good. Again, I can't speak to Carrie's experience. I would have loved there to be a little bit more of a view about where I should be concerned, where we were different, that I didn't know we were different.
As I mentioned earlier, Google Scholar was the best at helping me discover some blind spots in that area. Darcy, right up front through the whole migration, was like, be sure to check this, be sure, this happens on your site, be sure you do this. The other sort of blind spots were discovered by me asking questions. It wasn't necessarily the vendors coming to me. So be sure you ask your questions. Why isn't this working the way we thought it would? Or, and that's where you might get your spreadsheet back of 6,000 things that aren't working, which you didn't know about unless you asked. So ask questions.
Yeah, I know one of the things we did, especially for discovery services and link resolvers, was say, hey, so we're migrating soon. What do you need? Because at least in our department, we had no idea. We didn't exactly know the format of the metadata that they wanted or anything like that. And in some cases, we weren't able to supply it, but it was good to have that base of here is the optimal solution and what this all looks like.
And that query, what do you need, is more complex than it seems. So we made that query to some of our downstream data and content and metadata recipients, and the answer back was, just give us what you've been giving us. Well, I can't give you what we've been giving you. That came off of a whole nother platform. What are you expecting? I don't know, just give us what you... They don't know. You don't know. It's ridiculous, frankly. It's not documented. And again, this was, the last platform put together some kind of output, some kind of metadata file, dropped it off on an FTP site. Everybody went to get it. This is the first time we ever did it 15 years ago. So they programmed everything to that. We asked them, what are you going to need so that we could assess the gap? They couldn't tell us. Then when they started getting it, they said, oh, no, we need it in this other way, which was this completely hacked together way that was only relevant to the previous platform. All of this, if you assume that somebody should have something documented, it is not. It's not documented. Nobody knows it. We've all been doing this for 20, 25 years now, and nobody has it written down. If you do, more power to you. I have a question that I want to ask the audience and then ask the librarians. Okay, so I really want you to respond to this. If I say, I can't access something, what does that mean to you publishers? What does that look like? What do you assume is happening? And what do you assume my user experience is if I call and say, I don't have access to this? 404?
Yeah, it's difficult. We get a lot of those kind of emails like, I have this issue, I cannot access the article. Immediately, we need to follow up with more questions. Which article was it? What browser are you using? Was it just that article or also other articles? What country are you in? Can we reproduce it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just saying I can't have access. Yeah. We usually can't do anything with just that.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Oh, wait, sorry. I shouldn't have said go ahead.
We get a lot of, I hit the paywall, I should have access to this, and they don't. They think that, we had a member the other day call in and said, I know I have access to this, I updated my membership. Well, he was getting it through his company, and they didn't have access to what he expected them to have access to. So.
Anyone else want to share what you assume I don't have access means?
And sometimes there are ones that you just can't figure out. We had a guy contact us just last week who said, I was on my campus, I couldn't get in, his IP address is all checked out, but then he said, I went home and I got in through my university. And I had no idea what that meant. Why it worked in one place and it didn't work in the other, and our platform couldn't tell us, and we couldn't get any more information out of him. He said, it's solved now. I've got in, so.
So librarians, what do you mean when you say we don't have access to this? What are some of the user experiences you're having that cause you to say those words to us?
So first, before we go to you, we also are like, what does that mean? Because platforms are designed to monetize, It is confusing to users to know what they are supposed to have access to and not. It is not an obvious thing. It's not like the user goes to the platform and they only see what they should see. So frequently the information that we have, we are not telling users they should have access to something, and they're hitting a paywall because we never purchased that content in any way, shape, or form. But it's not clear. Like once they're on the platform, you know, they don't know, oh, I can't access something before 1997 on this journal, but on this journal you have the full back files. What's up with that? And that's because we never bought it. But, you know, I feel like this is a problem maybe with the ecosystem of how these things are provided, because there is this tension between, okay, your institution's buying this for you, and so we want to make it, you know, easy to tell, but hey, maybe you want to buy this article for $40 anyway, you know? So that's kind of like problem number one. Problem number two might be like, we just told them we had access, but actually we don't. So we do try to look that up, like, hey, are we supposed to have access to that? We say we should have access to the back files, but actually that's because SFX updated everything and they went back to like volume 1, but we never bought the back files for that title. Or we canceled that subscription, but we forgot to turn it off in this one place. So before we come to you, there's a whole process that we go through, and then it's like, okay, it looks like we should be subscribed to this, it looks like we should have access. Then we're going to come to ask the publisher and say, hey, from what we can tell, you know, we are able to reproduce what the user told us, which is, I went to go access an article, I wasn't allowed to download it, I'm on campus, I know the IP is registered, so it looks, you know, like that's where we're kind of starting when we come to the publisher.
So let me just share some of the examples of what we don't have access has meant through our migration. It was mind-blowing to me all the ways that that phrase, all the forms that phrase could take. So the most common is we don't have access. I went to the issue TOC and I see the article list and there's a lock, you know, whatever, a red cross or a lock by all of them. I don't have access. And then we figure out that they didn't try to download anything. They didn't try to click through to the article and see if the content is back there. They made the reasonable assumption that they should be able to trust those icons. But those are entirely separated technology. I mean, they're not entirely separated. They have to be connected to work. But that can be a bug. The access icon itself can be a bug, separate from whether you have access or not. So there was that. There was that a lot of our content is PDF only. So they were expecting to see the full text of an article in HTML, and they didn't, and they thought that that was the paywall. Again, not trying to download the PDF. The opposite of that was they only cared about downloading the PDF. They had the full text, but this was an instance where our PDF asset was missing. All of these tell us something. Oh, we have a bug in the access icons. Oh, we have missing content. Oh, we have a usability issue. So they're all good. But to you, they're just like, my people can't get what they need. And so, like, and I've had this experience going back through our customer relations saying, we need more information. They're saying, I don't want to ask them for more information. I don't want to bug them. But because of all these like tiny little nuances of what that person exactly was doing, it can mean that that lack of access has 6 different explanations, none of which have to do with, is that thing on your entitlements? Carrie?
Yeah, one of the things that we discovered, access issues, and it was perplexing to us at first. We were getting all these customers saying that they couldn't get access to our content, and they had a subscription. And, you know, in our records, it says their subscription was active, and we could not figure out why they weren't getting access. Well, it turns out all of these clients who didn't have access had renewed their subscription to 2018. Well, in that system, the 2018 subscription was overriding the 2017 subscription, so it looked like they didn't have access until 2018. So that was just one of the things that we had to fix, was, you know, allow for both subscriptions at once.
And that goes back to that do a deep dive on everything having to do with access and data to prevent these kinds of things, because you don't know how your new platform handles it exactly and all of those nuances.
I would just jump in and say, if
Yeah.
there's a second, that I feel like the list of examples that Kristen gave of people reporting access errors gives kind of justification to the argument that there should be some kind of beta testing period, because why should anyone know that those icons are wrong, right? And I think anytime you hear from a librarian, I think it's accepted within my institution that we hear the tiniest percentage of problem reports,
Yeah.
and that most people just move on and do something else. And so that every problem report from one of us, you should count as dozens of people
Yeah.
who had a bad experience
Yeah.
and left. And so things like that never need to make it. I mean, they do. Things happen, right? But that is exactly the kind of problem, or, right, having prominent screens that say log on, or having prominent things that make it look like you need to purchase something where people are just going to leave. And that's not what any of us want. And that is exactly the kind of thing you can catch in an earlier testing period.
If you can figure out the technical problems, because again, a lot of our we don't have access were discovery services that hadn't updated their links. And so the librarian did have access if they used the direct URL, but the URL that was being used was prefixed by the discovery service. And
For the usability problems
for
you
the
described,
usability problems,
right?
definitely.
Because those are under your control.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Just a
So-
comment.
go-
Can I just make one
Uh-huh.
comment? You had mentioned, like, I don't want to, bother them with a question. Bother us with the question. Please do. I mean,
Okay,
let's
take that
keep it-
back.
Yeah.
Take that back to customer relations.
Yes.
I definitely will take that back, and I also wanted to throw out that that's one of the reasons that having a phone number on the site can be so helpful, because it is so much quicker for your customer relations department to troubleshoot with someone on the phone than have 20 emails going back and forth, which could be an utter nightmare. But on that happy note of an utter nightmare, I think we're at time, and I think one of the takeaways from this is that platform migration does not have to be an utter nightmare, either for publishers or librarians. It's just working to troubleshoot some of these things and think a little bit in advance. But did you have any?
I just wanted to thank everybody who came and shared your perspectives. Really appreciate it. Here are our lovely librarians' email addresses. If you didn't get mine and Carrie's, we'll stay up here for a little while. Ask your fellow publishers what their experience has been. Let's start building that database of best practices and pitfalls. Thank you, everyone.